I used to think love was supposed to save me. I thought it was a hand pulling me out of the fire, a voice whispering in the darkness, "You're safe now." But love wasn't salvation. Not for me. For me, love became the heaviest chain I ever carried. Every word you said wrapped itself around me like metal links. Warm at first, then colder with time. Every promise, the ones whispered under fading sunsets, the ones sworn in the hush of night. They hardened into cuffs I couldn't break, and I carried them. Willingly. Blindly. Because I believed that to carry you was to carry meaning. But the truth, it wasn't meaning. It was weight. You don't notice chains at the beginning. Not when they're made of smiles, soft touches, sweet lies. They feel light, even comforting, like jewelry on your soul. You wear them proudly. You call them devotion. You call them loyalty. You call them love. But then one day, you wake up and you can't breathe. You can't move. You realize the necklace has become a collar. The bracelet is turned into shackles. And your devotion has turned into your prison. That was me. Chained. Suffocated. Smiling through the weight. Because that's what love conditioned me to do. To carry what wasn't mine. To bend under the illusions. To believe that broken promises could somehow be glued back together. It's strange, isn't it? How the very thing that promises to set you free becomes the thing that locks you down. Love became my coffin. I climbed inside willingly, believing it was a sanctuary. I closed the lid myself, because I thought it meant belonging. But it wasn't a sanctuary. It was a burial. And here's the cruel paradox. Letting go feels like death. It feels like the end of who you are. What is belonging if you lose yourself just to stay? I'll tell you what it is. It's a chain. And chains were made to be broken. So I stopped carrying. I stopped begging. I stopped trying to breathe life into the corpse of what we once had. And the world became quiet. A terrifying, suffocating quiet at first. But then, it became peace. For the first time, I could breathe. Not because someone loved me. Not because someone promised me forever. But because I had finally freed myself from the chains of needing them to. This isn't a love story. It isn't even a heartbreak story. It's the story of the man who died inside his chains and came back unchained. So if you're listening, remember this. What you let go of will never define you. What you release will never bury you. It will save you. Because the day you let go of everything is the day you finally become free. The first cut is always the deepest, not because of the wound it leaves on your skin, but because of the silence it leaves inside your soul. I remember the day you turned away, not with screams, not with fire, but with something colder, with distance, with absence, with the quiet kind of cruelty that doesn't bleed you all at once. It bleeds you drop by drop until you collapse. I thought I needed you. Every heartbeat I had trained itself to sync with yours. Every plan I made had your shadow stitched into it. I had wrapped my entire future around the fragile glass of your promises. And when you let it fall, it wasn't just the glass that shattered. It was me. You said things no one should ever hear. Not because they were loud, but because they cut in places no hand can ever reach. You're too much. You're not enough. You'll never be what I need. Each sentence carved into me like a blade. Each word left me smaller, until I didn't recognize the man staring back at me in the mirror. Not a warrior, not a king. Just a broken boy dressed in borrowed armor. But here's the truth no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't break you all at once. It shatters you in slow motion. Every glance, every dismissal, every moment you begged for presence and got absence instead. I stood in those ruins. Not ruins of buildings, but ruins of identity. Everything I thought I was, strong, loyal, worthy, lay in pieces at my feet. And the worst part, I stayed there. I tried to glue it back together. I begged broken glass to turn back into windows. I begged rusted chains to shine like gold again. I begged silence to whisper love. But silence doesn't lie. Silence speaks the truth, carves its lessons into your bones with fire. It taught me that love can be poison if it comes in the wrong cup. It taught me that devotion becomes death when it isn't returned. It taught me that giving everything to someone who gives you nothing is not loyalty. It's self-destruction. And so I learned the hardest truth of all. What I thought I needed was the very thing killing me. You once said, "Without me, you're nothing." I believed you. I carried that lie like scripture. But standing in those ruins, I realized something new. Without you, I wasn't nothing. Without you, I was finally free to become something else. The first cut bled me out. It hollowed me. It left me crawling through nights I thought would never end. But it also planted something. A seed. A question. A defiance. If I could survive the loss of everything I thought I needed, then maybe, just maybe, I didn't need it at all. So I let the cut bleed. I didn't bandage it with lies. I didn't stitch it with fake apologies. I let it pour out every last illusion I had carried. Because sometimes you have to bleed out the poison before you can heal. And when the bleeding stopped, when the silence wrapped around me like a shroud, I realized I was still alive. Barely, but alive. And that was enough. Enough to take the next step. Enough to stand, even if shaky. Enough to begin again, not as who I was, but as who I was becoming. You said I wasn't enough, so I became
Silence.
everything. At first, it felt like a punishment, like the universe itself had pressed a hand against my throat and said, "Now suffer." When you left, the noise went with you. The late-night texts, the meaningless arguments, the promises half-kept, all gone. And what remained was a room too quiet, a heart too loud, and a mind that replayed everything like a broken record. They say silence is peaceful, but not at first. At first, silence is a mirror. It forces you to face the reflection you've been running from. In the noise, I could pretend. I could drown in distractions. Convince myself that love was still alive. Tell myself that tomorrow we would fix it. But in silence, there are no excuses, only truth. Only the sound of my own heart cracking inside my chest. Nights became endless. Every tick of the clock mocked me. Every shadow in the corner whispered your name. I tried to fill the silence with music, with meaningless voices, with anything that could drown out the emptiness. But nothing worked. The silence always came back, and it sat with me like a cruel teacher. I hated it. But slowly, without realizing, I began to listen. Silence has a strange language. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It whispers. And if you stay with it long enough, if you let it hurt you, you begin to understand what it's been saying all along. It told me you were never weak. You were caged. You weren't abandoned. You were freed. You thought you needed them. You only needed first I resisted. How could pain be a gift? How could loneliness be a blessing? But the longer I stayed in silence, the more I began to see its shape of peace. Not joy, not happiness, but the calm that comes when you finally stop fighting what is gone. When you stop bleeding for what left you. When you accept that the silence isn't here to kill you. It's here to remake you. I stopped fearing it. I welcomed it. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Cold. Unshakable. Quiet. Power. You thought the silence would destroy me. You thought leaving me alone would bury me. But you didn't understand. Men like me are not buried by silence. We are born in it. The pain didn't disappear. It never does. But it transformed. It hardened. It sharpened. It became fuel. And every day I sat in that silence, I grew colder. I grew stronger. I grew freer. I stopped waiting for closure. I stopped begging for apologies. I stopped carrying words that were never mine. I realized the only voice I needed to hear was my own. And in silence, it became loud enough to drown out every ghost. Silence was my crucible. But fire was my rebirth. I had spent too long holding on to ashes, calling them love. Too long clutching dead weight and pretending it still had life. And then one night, I realized I had a choice. Either keep dragging the corpse of what once was, or burn it. The fire didn't come as rage at first. It came as clarity. A steady flame in my chest, whispering, "This doesn't serve you anymore. Let it burn." I looked at the old photos, the messages I had reread 1,000 times, hoping they'd change meaning. The promises carved into my memory like holy scripture. And for the first time, they didn't feel sacred. They felt heavy, poisonous, rotting. So I struck the match. You see, burning isn't about destruction. It's about purification. Fire doesn't just consume. It cleanses. It removes the illusions you built, the lies you carried, the chains you mistook for love. I began to let the fire touch every corner of me, every memory, every excuse. Every time I said, maybe they'll change. Gone. And it hurt. It hurt more than the silence. Because silence shows you the truth. But fire forces you to kill what you once worshipped. Every time I burned another piece, I heard your voice. The empty promises. The cutting dismissals. The way you made me feel disposable, while I made you my everything. And I let the fire eat it all, because I was done carrying coffins disguised as comfort. Done feeding a ghost that only haunted me. Done setting myself on fire just to keep you warm. The fire bled into everything. Power of knowing nothing outside of me could ever break me again. Because everything outside of me had already been burned. The fire was not revenge. It wasn't about proving you wrong. It wasn't about showing the world I was still standing. No. The fire was about me. Finally. Fully. Only me. I burned so that I could stand lighter. I burned so that I could breathe freer. I burned so that no chain, no illusion, no false promise could ever touch me again. You thought you left me in ruins, but I set the ruins on fire, and I walked out, forged. Fire left me in ruins. But ruins are not the end. Ruins are foundations. When the flames had consumed everything I thought I needed, I stood surrounded by ashes. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't empty. I was clean. Rebuilding doesn't begin with bricks. It begins with breath. The first breath you take when you're no longer drowning in someone else's lies. The first step you take when your feet are not chained by false promises. It is small. It is fragile. But it is everything. I started with myself. Not the broken reflection. Not the man defined by betrayal. But the core that remained after the fire. And I asked him, "What are you now?" The answer was simple. Not weak. Not abandoned. Not worthless. Just unfinished. Discipline became my hammer. Pain became my chisel. Every day, I carved myself out of the stone I had been buried under. I rebuilt not through words, but through action. In the gym, I found my cathedral. The clang of weights replaced the sound of your voice. The ache in my muscles replaced the ache in my chest. Every rep was a vow. I will rise. Every drop of sweat was proof. I am not who I was yesterday. Ashes have a way of teaching you what really matters. When everything is gone, you see with perfect clarity what is worth carrying forward. Not love that demands your destruction. Not loyalty that leaves you alone. What remains is truth. And the truth is this: you are not defined by what left. You are defined by what you build when it's gone. I built boundaries, not walls of weakness, but gates of strength. Pieces. But pieces can be arranged into something stronger. You thought the fire destroyed me, but destruction was creation. You thought the ashes were my grave, but ashes are where phoenixes rise. The ascent was not loud. It was steady. Each day I rose a little higher. Each day I carried a little less of you and a little more of myself. And one morning, I looked around and realized I wasn't climbing for revenge. I wasn't climbing to show you. I wasn't climbing for anyone else's eyes. I was climbing because I finally understood. The only crown that matters is the one you forge for yourself. When you've rebuilt yourself from ashes, there comes a day when you no longer rise just to stand. You rise to sit. Not on the ground, not among the ruins, but on the throne that was carved for you by everything that tried to break you. Freedom is a throne, and once you sit on it, you understand power in a way you never could when you were chained, when you still carried love like a weapon against yourself. You were vulnerable. When you needed their approval, you were owned. When you begged for their attention, you were enslaved. But when you let go, truly let go, you realized the throne was always there, waiting for you to stop kneeling. I used to think power was control over others, that to dominate meant to bend the world to your will. But I was wrong. Power is not when they bow to you. Power is when you don't need them to. Power is when you can walk into any room with nothing to prove. When you can lose anyone and remain whole. When you can be betrayed, abandoned, forgotten, and still rise untouched. That's what freedom gave me. And freedom became my throne. Do you know why people fear men who have nothing to lose? Because they are untouchable. Because you cannot threaten what has already been burned. Because a man who has let go of everything cannot be caged by anything. I became that man. Not because I wanted to, but because life forced me to. And in that forcing, found the crown I was born to wear. Sitting on that throne doesn't mean life stops hurting. It means pain no longer dictates your direction. It means betrayal no longer bends your spine. It means love is no longer a chain, but a choice. And the greatest choice I ever made was to belong to myself first. You thought leaving me would leave me powerless, but leaving inheritance. Your silence was my crown. Freedom is power because it cannot be bought. It cannot be begged for. It cannot be stolen. It must be built. And once you build it, you realize you were never meant to be a servant. You were always meant to be a king. You thought leaving me would strip me of everything, but it only left me with the one thing you could never take: my throne. There comes a point in every man's rise where the climb is no longer about survival. It becomes about dominion. I had walked through betrayal. I had bled in silence. I had burned in fire. I had risen from ashes. I had claimed my throne in solitude. And now came the moment of truth. To stand as untouchable. Do you know what untouchable means? It doesn't mean you cannot be hurt. It doesn't mean you do not feel. It means no wound can control you. It means no loss can own you. It means no betrayal can bend you back into chains. Untouchable is not the absence of pain. It is the mastery of it. Once, your words cut me like blades. Now they are whispers in the wind. Once, your absence drowned me in silence. Now silence is my kingdom. Once, your betrayal shattered me. Now those shards are the edges of the crown I wear. You see, you didn't break me. You built me. Not by love, not by loyalty, but by forcing me into the fire I never would have chosen for myself. And from that fire, I became something you cannot touch. Not because I am beyond reach, but because there is nothing left to take. When you love without chains, they cannot enslave you. When you live without fear of loss, they cannot threaten you. When you rise without needing applause, they cannot silence you. That is untouchable. I remember the boy who begged to be enough. The man who carried chains and called them devotion. He died in your absence. And in his place, I was reborn. mountain that has survived every storm and now laughs at the thunder. You wanted me fragile. You wanted me desperate. You wanted me needing you. But now I am sovereign, and sovereignty cannot be begged for, cannot be borrowed, cannot be stolen. It must be built. And I built mine from the wreckage you left behind. You thought you buried me, but all you did was plant me. And now I stand as the tree whose roots you cannot cut, and whose crown you cannot touch. The story ends not with noise, but with silence. Not with a scream of victory, but with the calm breath of a man who has nothing left to prove. I let go of everything. And in the letting go, I became free. Freedom is not loud. It doesn't parade itself. It doesn't need applause. It simply is. It sits within you, unshaken, unmovable, like a throne carved into your very bones. That's what I found. Not revenge, not closure, not some fairy tale reunion. I found myself. And that was enough. You see, I used to think strength was about holding on to love, holding on to loyalty, holding on to people who had already let go of me. But strength isn't about holding on. It's about releasing, about letting things fall that were never yours to carry, about walking away from chains even when they feel like comfort. And when you release, when you let go, you don't become empty. You become sovereign. Now, my silence speaks louder than my words ever did. Now, my scars are no longer reminders of loss, but proof of resurrection. Now, my solitude isn't loneliness, it's dominion. And when I walk, I carry no chains, no promises that cut me, no illusions that blind me, no ghosts that weigh me down. I am free. This is my oath. Not to you, not to the world, but to myself. I will never again bow to chains disguised as love. I will never again trade my soul for someone else's comfort. I will never again let silence be my enemy. From this day forward, silence is my ally. Pain is my forge. Fire is my rebirth. And freedom is my crown. So if you ever wonder what became of me after you left, know this: I did not break.